This week on PREVIEWSworld Weekly, we get your reactions to Ruby Rose as Batwoman. We're going to check out the all-new lineup for Guardians of the Galaxy and the Death of Daredevil. Check it out, it's starting right now. Hey Previews World, what got you into comics? That's the question on our mind this week. But first, welcome to PREVIEWSworld Weekly. I am one of your hosts, Troy Jeffrey Allen.
And I'm Thea, and we're here every week to remind you guys to stop at a local comic shop to get involved in the world of comics.
So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to get into our secret files, our personal origins about how we got into comics, but we're also going to talk to creators. We're going to ask you, the fans, to chime in, but we're going to talk a little bit amongst ourselves right now, right? Amongst? I can do amongst, right?
Amongst works.
That works, right? Okay. So Thea, let me ask you this. How did you get into comics? Because origin stories are fun. I'm just curious, how did you get into it?
I started in middle school with Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Okay.
I picked that up at my local Hot Topic, which is about as far as I could get into the world that I grew up in, where I was raised in the trees, basically. So the farthest I got to civilization, well, I mean, Northern Maryland, rural, horses, cows, trees. And we basically just got to the mall once in a while. And I know there was a comic shop in my mall, but I was not really aware of it. So as a young goth kid, I ran into the Hot Topic and I was like, cool, we've got comics in here, let's check that out. So we got Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and little side stories, we got Squee and all those things.
Right, yeah.
Lenore the Little Dead Girl from Roman Dirge.
That's right, yeah.
So that's about where I really began. And then I started reading, I guess, a little Teen Titans and some, what else did I get into? A little bit of Watchmen, I guess, in high school.
Okay, right, yeah.
And then, in college, into Fables, and I actually read more comics now than I ever have. So,
nice. So Yonan Vasquez was your gateway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's good. That was cool. I probably started. Well, actually, I think maybe middle school really was the sweet spot for me. But I definitely was in that era of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles craze.
Perfect.
So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures was the age-appropriate Archie book. For the TMNT franchise, so I kind of came into it through that, and I think it was also it was the kind of the perfect confluence, I guess, of things, because it was Ninja Turtles, Batman, the 1989 Batman, then the 1990 Ninja Turtles movie, and then that was almost immediately followed by the X-Men craze. So X-Men #1 came out, and it had all the covers, and I just kind of ate it all up. And I think that's kind of the great thing about comics is you can, with a book like X-Men #1, you kind of introduced to all these characters, and it kind of gives you a little bit of backstory, but then you get to a point where you're okay, I need to find out more about these guys, right? So you kind of go up, down, sideways. I looked into the stuff from the 80s, looked into stuff from the 90s, going through back issue bins, all that stuff. And speaking of jumping on points, X-Men #1 was a perfect jumping on point for me, and your local comic shop always has jumping on points every single week. Anna is here to show us what's at comic shops and what you can pick up right now.
What's up, Previews World? Anna here, and I'm going to give you a look at some of the new titles in stores this week. Here's what's at comic shops. And we're just getting started. The world of comics has even more to offer, so stop at a comic shop already, and you might just find your new favorite thing. See ya!
And if you're looking for a good jumping on point this week, I can give you a suggestion right now. Check out Gideon Falls by Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino. Issue #7 is in stores this week, so that's a new story arc for you, but also this week is the trade paperback. So if you're looking for a horror thing, this is from the guys who did the Old Man Logan series, after Mark Millar had his initial run with it. It's got a supernatural aspect to it. It's about that was the best way to put it. It's about a priest and a conspiracy theorist who's kind of a dumpster diver, so he's always looking for clues to kind of help his conspiracy. And it takes place in the city, and they both are share the same city space, I guess. And there's this thing called the Black Barn. It's like this building that shows up. It's kind of like the monolith in 2001.
Sure.
And it just drives people mad whenever it shows up, and it's kind of feeding this conspiracy. So it's there's a lot of mystery that you kind of have to unravel to kind of get into this book. But the trade paperback is in this week. It comes highly recommended from a lot of people. I need to read it, clearly. But it's a bestseller, and the trade paperback and number 7 are in stores this week. Cool. What are you into this week?
I am into Exer Sisters. So this is a new thing going out from Image, and it's writer Ian Boothby from Simpsons.
Oh, yeah,
and artist Giselle Legasse, who does Archie, and very much Archie looking from you can really see the influence there. And this is another sort of supernatural, paranormal thing that, apparently I'm really into. And this follows Kate and Kate, that's Kate with a C and Kate with a K, Harrow, two twin sisters who are in the business of soul retrieval at a reasonable rate.
Oh, okay.
So whether you've signed a deal with the devil or your fiancé has been dragged to hell, they call these girls up and they'll help you out. And yeah, it just looks like a cool book.
All right, cool. No, that's awesome. I'm going to break the pattern of supernatural stories for a second and talk about Shuri by Nnedi Okorafor and Leonardo Romero. The cool thing about this one is, it's number 1, so it's another great jumping on point this week. But on top of that, it's kind of a side story to Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther book.
Very good.
And the one thing I found really interesting about this is that Ta-Nehisi Coates, he had a award-winning run on Black Panther the last couple of years. And I thought it was interesting because he made a lot of changes to Shuri, who is Black Panther's sister. And then he saw the Black Panther movie. And his reaction was kind of oh, let me try something else. So, and I find that interesting because this book looks like a shift in that direction. So the Black Panther is currently in space in his own book, and we're back on Earth in Wakanda, and all the people of Wakanda are looking towards Shuri to not necessarily even be a leader, but just for some sort of guidance. And this book kind of follows that, but she ultimately just wants to be a scientist. That's kind of her calling. So yeah, it's a new book. It's from Nnedi Okorafor, like I said, who's actually done a string of Wakanda books focusing on the Dora Milaje. And they're actually really cool. She did a Spider-Man one with Black Panther, and then she did the Dora Milaje, and she did an X-Men one. They're a lot of fun. So this is actually a good book to kind of pick up if you're into any of the Marvel stuff or the Black Panther stuff.
Absolutely.
What else was on your list?
Yeah, so another really good jumping off point for everybody here. This is a book that's going to be compiling a mini-series that DC put out for Raven. It's Daughter of Darkness. So this is volume 1, and this is a really cool storyline. She's facing a whole new set of menaces. She's got this whole thing going with her mother and her aunt who are struggling for the soul of a Titan. So her personal life's in uproar. And then she has this adventure called The Girls with the Anime Eyes. It's just this sort of mishmash of really interesting stuff going on, I think. So yeah. That's another neat one.
Nice little collection. I think it's Marv Wolfman too. Who's one of the main Teen Titan architects. So that's actually really cool to see him returning to those characters.
Absolutely.
Just real quick, I want to give a shout out to Batman 57. Which is I believe it's part 2 of a storyline that Tom King is currently doing. But it's got KG Beast in it, but the cover just looks so awesome. I just love how it's quintessential Batman. It's just him barreling down on you. It takes place in Siberia, and it's him versus KG Beast, like I said, which is actually a nice opposition for Batman. Absolutely. Because they're both so unrelenting. And shout out to Tony Daniel because that cover looks amazing.
Yeah.
Also from DC, Suicide Squad Unwrapped, which is part of a series that they've been doing for a while of hardcovers that is kind of just the art stripped down to the pencils. Cool. Which is doubly cool because we were talking earlier about X-Men number 1. Jim Lee's Suicide Squad, who Jim Lee, of course, responsible for X-Men number 1, one of the people responsible. I just think it's really cool because I don't have any artistic skill, but it's really interesting to see the pencils because you really get an idea of how much painstaking detail goes into comic art.
Oh, man.
That's kind of the unique thing about comic art.
For sure.
It's just so much detail into each panel, each thing, especially when you're dealing with Jim Lee. I'm a big fan. It's a $30 book, I believe, but totally worth it just because you get to see. It's pretty. I mean, it really is what it is. It's a nice coffee table book for the nerd crowd. So, and there you go. Those are some of the books that we're looking forward to this week. We're gonna kick it over to news in a second. So go ahead, take it away, Thea.
All right, so we've got some really cool announcements again this week. We've got some stuff from Marvel. Guardians of the Galaxy has a new ongoing series from the creative team of Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw, and this series is going to introduce a bigger and even stranger cast of characters for the team. So the new cover art was revealed piece by piece, and we now have the revealed new lineup of Groot, Moondragon, Nova, Silver Surfer, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Adam Warlock, Beta Ray Bill, Darkhawk, Star-Lord, Phyla-Vell, and Gladiator. So keep an eye out for this coming out in the next year, 2019.
Awesome.
Yes, it looks really cool. We've got a cool crowd of characters that...
The powerhouses.
Yeah, absolutely. That artwork is also really cool. Next up, we have Goon. So for almost 2 decades, the Goon's whiskey-fueled adventures thrilled fans, critics, and creators with their bold creativity, classic style, and irreverent humor. And this is going to be their 20th anniversary revival by artist Eric Powell and his publishing company, Albatross Funny Books. And it's an all-new Goon series featuring never-before-published stories, debuting this coming spring. And this marks the first new Goon stories to be published since Dark Horse's publication in 2015. And it's going to kick off a year-long anniversary celebration featuring a national signing tour, collected editions of classic Goon graphic novels, and some limited edition Goon tiki mugs, and more. And next up we have Aquaman, and we know we're all eagerly awaiting the new film that doesn't hit theaters till December 21st, but you can get your fill of Momoa's Aquaman and Amber Heard's Mera in an exclusive series of movie-inspired variant covers. So these are going to be showing up this fall in the Aquaman Justice League crossover called Drowned Earth. And there are going to be 6 variant covers featuring art inspired by the upcoming film. And even better, the event kicks off later this month, so you only have to wait a mere few weeks to grab the first cover at your local comic shop. Last but not least, we have WWE Forever. So Boom Studios and WWE announced WWE Forever Number One, an all-new oversized one-shot special featuring action-packed stories of the greatest WWE legends. So this is going to be various creative teams that are recounting famous showdowns, tag team partnership origins, and other antics by some of the greatest performers in WWE history. This is going to include a main cover, 2 variants, including a wraparound pre-order cover. And the artwork is all really cool. I love this stuff. And as someone who knows basically all her knowledge from Glow, even I can appreciate the awesome rendering of Andre the Giant on that main cover.
Yeah.
That is beautiful artwork for sure. So that's going to be available January 30th. And for fans of the classics or those of you that just like a good story, go pick this stuff up.
Yeah. No, the WWE books from Boom have legs. Also, seriously, shout out to Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw who are doing that Guardians of the Galaxy book. He's been pretty much just telling it like a saga for the last couple of months really. It started off in Thanos Wins, which sold out like crazy.
Absolutely.
And it came out right before Infinity War, but was just hit at the right time. Then that extended Thanos Legacy, and then the Infinity Wars book, Cosmic Ghost Rider, which I know a lot of people here are a fan of.
Yeah.
And so to see this all kind of culminate and to see the aftermath, I'm looking forward to that book.
Absolutely.
Also, I want to point out that the Drowned Earth book, the Justice League Aquaman series, the tie-in book drops this week. So it's kind of like the prelude book that's coming out with the Aquaman. I won't say the issue number because I might get it wrong. But the Aquaman out this week is a nice little prelude book to that. Cool. So, and you can find out more news. Head on over to PREVIEWSworld.com and get all the latest. And your local comic shop is home to not just comic books. Crazy, right? You can also get toys. So let's take a look at the toys that are in comic shops this week. And it just so happens that we have one of this week's new toy releases in studio right now. This is the Rorschach and Mime Doomsday Clock 2-pack. This is part of a series, and also in the series is the comedian and Dr. Manhattan, who has pants, by the way. We'll just point that out. And Ozymandias. They all come as a 2-pack in different assortments.
Yeah.
And this is from DC Collectibles, and of course it's based on Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's existing Doomsday Clock miniseries, and we are going to give this away.
Yeah, if you guys want to win these guys, we know that a lot of people's first comic was Watchmen, but we want to know what yours was. Comment below, either Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching. Let us know, and we'll pick one of you guys to win this.
Yeah. No, these are actually pretty cool. Like I'm just going to spin this around real quick just to show the other 2 packs. So you have some classics mixed with some of the newer characters from the more recent Doomsday Clock series. But of course you have Watchmen's Rorschach, you have the Mime, you have Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias, so that's like a classic pairing right there. And the Comedian and the Marionette, who's also a newer character. And these are like legit action figures, which is, you know, amusingly enough, there were action figures of the Watchmen characters in the original Alan Moore book. And like to see these in like real life. Now here they are. And like also I want to put on DC Collectibles celebrating their 20th anniversary, which is also pretty cool. So yeah, definitely check this out. Like, you know, you get Rorschach and the Mime, you get a little kung fu objectivism from Rorschach, I guess. I don't know quite what to call it. And while you're answering, go ahead and check out this trailer for The Death of Daredevil by Charles Soule, currently coming out from Marvel, in stores right now.
I am here today to tell you that it's sort of sad news, but it's also exciting in a way that my long-running Daredevil run will wrap up with issue 612. A lot of writers in the past have left Daredevil in terrible situations at the end of their runs. Brian Michael Bendis put him in prison for Ed Brubaker to handle. Mark Waid, who preceded me, had Daredevil in San Francisco. His secret identity was blown. He wasn't a lawyer anymore. I had to handle all of that. So I wanted to carry on in the grand tradition of leaving Daredevil in the worst spot imaginable, letting the next writer somehow deal with this impossible problem that Matt will never get out of. And I wanted to make mine the biggest one that has ever been done, which is why I'm calling my last arc on Daredevil, Death of Daredevil.
And that is The Death of Daredevil from Marvel Comics by Charles Soule and Phil Noto. So it's like actually a nice team of creators. The cool thing about this is an extension of Charles Soule's Mayor Fisk arc. So Wilson Fisk has become the mayor of New York City, which has turned Matt Murdock's world into a living hell, no pun intended. And you know, I'm one of those people, my only real requirement for Daredevil is that you make his life miserable. And so, but the cool thing about this storyline is like, he's finally gotten to the point where he's like, my life is miserable. Maybe I should stop being Daredevil. So this has been a fun storyline. It's coming out from Marvel now, and you can get the trade for the Mayor Fisk story arc from your local comic shop, of course. So definitely check that out. And now we're going to get into the murky waters of the Social Swamp and talk about Ruby Rose and Iron Fist.
So we finally have some images of Ruby Rose in the Batwoman costume, and the internet is talking. Yeah, right?
As they do.
We've got some reactions. We have somebody saying that she looks stunning.
Okay,
right?
Nice.
We've got largely positives after a string of negatives from the original announcement of her playing the part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there was like a very bizarre, it was a bizarre week where they first announced her, where people were saying like, you know, she's not this, she's not that, she's not, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, it's just proof that you should wait and see.
Absolutely.
Like, that's kind of my pattern.
I am always of the school of, especially with somebody like Ruby Rose, where I've seen her in stuff, but it's largely smaller parts, so I don't really know what she's doing in terms of acting and you know how she's going to play it. So you gotta let it flow, guys.
Right.
Gotta let it go.
Truthfully, it might just be like they got her for like the physical aspects. She might not even talk that much on the show.
Fair enough. That's true. Yeah.
You know? I saw John Wick too. She doesn't talk that much in that movie.
Exactly.
So.
She's got little parts and has a few lines, and that's all we've seen so far.
Or maybe she'll surprise you. Like Jason Momoa was one of those people that like he never talked in anything, and then now everybody loves him as Aquaman. Yeah. So you just never know, internet.
You don't.
Take it easy.
Calm down.
Like people didn't like Michael Keaton as Batman. People didn't like Heath Ledger as Batman initially. Like, you know, you just have to wait and see. So
for sure.
Speaking of things that people say on the internet.
Yeah.
Sometimes negativity wins, that kind of thing. But
sometimes it does, sadly.
Yeah.
So it turns out that Iron Fist has been canceled.
Yeah.
Which I think is a negative.
Yeah, I think it's a negative.
Because I do enjoy the show. We've got a couple people here. It says, a shame Netflix gave up on Iron Fist. Many people really liked the series. and somebody else saying, no matter, now they have a reason to focus on heroes for hire.
Right, which is cool. I mean, that's a very good point. Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, if you watched the last season of Luke Cage, which actually turned out to be really good. Like,
Yeah.
I actually was like a big fan of that season.
Me too.
They did a full episode where it was just Danny and Luke, and like they're just kind of like palling around, like busting crime, I guess, for the most part.
Right.
But
Exchanging wisdom.
like really, yeah, like exchanging wisdom,
Yeah.
like particularly from Danny, which I
Yes.
think people wanted to see more of. And like, you know, I think you really got to see the concept work.
Yes.
Like, you know, which I know a lot of people initially were kind of against, you know, the depiction of Danny. You were talking earlier about how he's like a
Yeah.
13-year-old trapped in an adult man's body.
Right, and that's when I started watching the series. I watched it way later than everybody else, so the response I got from people when I said I was thinking about watching it was like, you know, he doesn't seem to fit the character. He's sort of whiny and kid-like, and I'm like, but that's what he would be. Like,
Right.
his plane crashed in the middle of nowhere. He grew up in a place wildly different from his origin, and then comes back to it. And they expect him to be like assimilated and act sort of normal,
Right. In modern
as
New
it were.
York?
Yeah, in modern New York, after, you know, living with monks. So I don't know. I always found that he was portrayed the way I would have expected him to be.
Like a lot of people were upset about the fact that, I'm going to say this, unjustly so, were upset about the fact that Danny Rand was like taking the lead as the character in this martial arts led show. And I won't get too much into all those details, but it's just one of those things where like anybody can learn martial arts. This is how the character's been for the last 30 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, like roughly 30 years. And I think as we saw in Heroes for Hire, the reason that you do that is because you have this naive persona
Yes.
paired up with somebody who's becoming a little bit more cynical in Luke Cage.
Exactly.
And they get to bounce off of each other.
It
you
works
know?
really well.
And we got to see that play out in the Defender show.
Yep.
We got to see that play out like in terms of like Danny being more dangerous because he's very naive,
Yeah.
and he's a little too trusting, but he's also got the emotional range of a child, you know, and that becomes a problem for Daredevil and Jessica Jones and the rest of the crew.
Absolutely.
And you know, I'm not finished with season 2 of Iron Fist yet, but everything I've seen so far, I enjoy it.
Good.
Like, you know, I think I like the show.
The second season definitely has an overwhelmingly more positive result.
Yeah, right. Like it really is like the proof of the concept,
Yeah.
like playing out. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but
What do you
shows
wanna
get
do?
canceled.
Yeah.
You know, and like you said, hopefully he'll show up in like Luke Cage a little bit more often now.
Sure.
So, and on that note, we're going to go ahead and jump on over to. Actually, we're going to talk. We talked a little bit earlier about like what got you into comics, and it just so happens that at Baltimore Comic-Con, I had a chance to talk to a collection of artists. Who all shared their origin stories. Like, you know, we got into their secret files and talked to them about what got them into comics. So here you go. It's Marguerite Bennett. It's Joe Pruitt from AfterShock Comics, Terry Moore from Strangers in Paradise, and a few others. Check it out. How did you get into comics? Like, not professionally, but just as a fan. Like, what was the thing that just kind of like spearheaded you into this world?
The first thing that really got me was Watchmen.
Okay.
That really pulled me in on so many different levels. There's so many layers to that particular book that you just can't ignore. Historically, socially, politically, there's just so much. It really just showed me that comics is a medium it's really just art.
Yeah.
It's art, it's literary, has a lot of literary value that people kind of ignore because they're like, oh yeah, it's just going to be, you know, superheroes beating each other up.
Yeah.
No, it's not. There's just so much more to it. And the second thing that really got me into it was Twisted Toy Fair Theater. It was hilarious. So I love
that you just dropped that. That was great.
Yeah.
I used to love Twisted Toy Fairs.
Yeah, it's great. So
what about you, Joe?
I got into comics at a very early age. I actually pretty much learned to read from comics. I remember going to local, you know, the gas station, little convenience stores, where they had spinner racks. And I can remember the first comic I bought was Iron Man number 52, like Spider-Man 112, Marvel Spotlight number 5. I was a Marvel zombie to start, but I got in, I never got out.
All right, yeah.
So.
How did you get into comics? Not even professionally. Just as readers, how did you get into comic books?
Well, when I was 6 years old, my mom gave me an Easter basket that had a Captain America and a Fantastic Four comic book in it. And I remember that it was Fantastic Four number 178. And I remember looking at the corner box and thinking, if this means that there's 177 comic books before this, I have to read every single one of them.
Yes.
So I got it instantly. I got the bug.
Right.
I was a little bit later. I was in middle school. It was first day of 6th grade, and I was already a voracious reader. And this was around the time the Tim Burton Batman movie came out, so they released this kind of like anthology novel of like a bunch of different writers writing Batman stories. And so I'm sitting up at the front of the classroom reading this, and my soon-to-be best friend John saw it and assumed that because I was reading a Batman novel, I must be a comic fan, which was not true. And then he handed me a Chris Claremont, Jim Lee X-Men, and I just like lost my mind, and that was the end of it.
There you go. That's a sweet spot right there.
Yeah, it really was.
I was around in 1989. I know how that was. It was a good time.
It was.
I was a little boy reading comics, just like all the little boys here at the show, probably 6 years old. And the minute I could start reading anything at all, I got comics. And I remember the first ones being like, Dennis the Menace or Sugar and Spike, whatever those old things were back then, Archie. And there's one Archie comic I've never forgotten, and now I'm an old man, so if I still remembered, it made a big impression.
Right,
But it was an issue where Archie woke up and went through his morning routine at home, ate breakfast, and then went to school, and riding him, driving down the street in his jalopy. And I thought, wow, you can just do regular life in comics. You don't have to put on a cape and fly to the moon.
Right, yeah.
It's interesting to watch this guy wake up and get to school. And I think that influenced me years later when it was my turn, that I could write about regular people doing extraordinary things.
Hey, I was an Archie guy too, so like that got me into comics in the first place. So I'm right there.
It's relatable.
Yeah.
And when I liked Spider-Man, it's because he went to high school, and then when he thought he had powers, he went back to his room and practice walking on the wall and the ceiling. I mean, I wanted to put my socks on and walk on the ceiling too, So when we were in high school, I wasn't ever thinking about doing this. But when we were in high school, we would draw cartoons to make each other laugh. And I went all through high school. That was my drawing tool, was a 19-cent Bic pen. I drew so many versions of Batman that were so wrong with this pen. You don't even want to know what we did to Batman in high school with this pen. But, it taught me how to draw sequencing and story art. There's a difference between drawing a pen up and a story.
Right, of course, yeah.
So that I learned that, it's funny to draw one scene, but if you set it up, it's even funnier. And that's how I learned story and pacing.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know, and that's how I got started.
All right, so there was it was just a gradual thing for you. Just kind of like, pretty much like from Archie, kind of like you started drawing around, and then like you discovered sequential just kind of on your own, it kind of seems like. But even though it was in the back of your head the whole time.
I kind of fell in love with it in high school by trying to learn how to make my friends laugh more. So you look at other stuff in a different way now. You're looking at just what was it they were doing in Mad Magazine that made it so funny,
Right, yeah.
So I started paying attention to art in that way, way back when I was like 14, 15, And you look at my mom has a sketchbook from when I was about 6 or so, and all the superheroes are in there, drawn with really bad knees and hands. But there's also a cartoon sequence of a guy and a girl talking about relationship, like he's breaking up with her and she doesn't care. What kind of 6-year-old draws that? What was wrong with me? So I'm just wired to do this thing that I do. I'm just wired that way.
I mean, hey, the interpersonal aspect seems to be like a huge thing for you with Strangers in Paradise. So
you got to do what you do best. I mean, everybody has they're wired a certain way. Do it. Go with it.
Just figuring it out.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And you can check out more interviews. We'll have them on our Previews World YouTube, on our website, on our Twitter, and on our Facebook. One of the cool things about Baltimore Comic-Con was I saw a consistent theme of people saying, like, let's get back to focusing on fun in comics, which I think is kind of like very much it's a soft call to action in a lot of ways. I think people are kind of like over kind of some of the conversations that we keep having in comics, and I'll leave it at that. And I think that, especially for creators, but also for fans, I think it's important for them that they just kind of find what they loved about it, which is what we're here for.
Yes.
Which is why we're asking you, how did you get into comics?
Yes.
Next week, we're going to talk a little about Halloween Comic Fest. We're going to have a special guest on the show, so be sure to tune in. Halloween Comic Fest, of course, happens every year in October at your local comic shop. And speaking of local comic shops,
we want you guys to let us know what your favorite local comic shop is. Drop us a line, #SupportYourLCS, and we could give you a shout out on the show with what you decided to tell us.
Cool. And that's it for us this week. This is Previews World Weekly. I am Troy Jeffrey Allen.
And I'm Fia, and we'll see you at the spinner rack.
Hey Previews World! Did you enjoy this video? Then let's be friends! Follow Previews World by clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any new content.